and gentlemen, I will be playing Malcolm Arnold's Scherzato. Please enjoy.
Song cycle, which he wrote at the young age of 16. The first is a melancholic song about a tulip which we take to be a woman. But as the song ends, we find out that this woman or tulip never really materializes. In the second, the narrator warns the rose of the dangers of falling into love. In the third, the narrator takes on the form of an old man discussing what will happen when all is said and done with his life. And the final ending song juxtaposes themes of power, of money, of age and wisdom with a mere rose.
Lost.
Why should a man, though 6 foot tall, think he matters at all, at all? And though he live for 70 years, does he suppose that anyone cares? Rather let me to him propose the flashed example of the rose, who with a dazzling inch of sand a summer's day weighs imminent upon the spirit entranced, and goes richer with that than he with those.
we're ready for the education. Paul is at a very hard time, as you would imagine, and it's not an easy. I'm glad I'm not doing it. I said, whatever you do is right. Trying to compare completely different things. So loads and loads of really, really interesting music, fantastic little concert. And it's a shame almost that we have to pick a winner, but as it is a competition, that has to be done. And before I hand over to Paul, just a big thank you to Liz Haley for accompanying. Anyway, over to Paul, who's going to say a bit about everybody. Yeah.
Thank you, Tommy. Thank you very much indeed, everyone, for being here. And what a great pleasure and delight it is to be back here at Eton for this wonderful occasion, this Malcolm Arnold competition. Maybe just a few words about Malcolm. You might be thinking, why a Malcolm Arnold competition at Eton? And it's quite complicated, actually, but the Malcolm Arnold archive, that is to say, many of Malcolm's manuscripts and other things are now here at Eton in the spectacular archive that you have here. There is a score there of one of the flute concertos, original score for you to have a look at. And it is a fascinating and fantastic archive. I hope some of the students that are here this evening will go and look at it, and you can learn a lot from just looking at Malcolm's music and his fascinating hand. And what an interesting occasion to have this kind of full immersion into quite a lot of works of one composer in one evening. I run a festival, Malcolm Arnold Festival, every year. We have a whole weekend of total immersion. And the wonderful thing about Arnold's music is that you can never have too much of it, in fact, because it's so different. It's so different. And even in these pieces this evening, a rich and serious array and range of musical styles, in a sense. I mean, very much the Malcolm Arnold style, but the Malcolm Arnold style is very broad, and it encompasses such a rich range of emotion and feeling and character, from some very dark music, which we heard quite a bit of this evening, to some extremely witty music. I mean, he writes at both ends of the spectrum. And why is Malcolm important? Malcolm is an important composer, and I'm glad to say getting more important as people begin to understand his music more. Some years ago, not that many years ago, Malcolm was considered a bit of a lightweight composer. He wrote one or two lightweight pieces, pieces like the Grand Overture. Anyone know the Grand Overture? The Grand Overture has an orchestra, but it also has an array of vacuum cleaners and floor polishers and rifles and such like playing in it. And people thought, well, this is fun, but it's fun, it's lightweight. Pieces like the Padstow Lifeboat, a serious piece, but maybe a bit lightweight. And these were the works that Malcolm was known for, a bit of a lightweight composer. Over the last few years, quite a few years, suddenly people are beginning to know that he wrote a lot of serious music as well. There are 9 symphonies, and those serious musicians amongst you here, and I know that all students here are very serious musicians. You think about your music a lot. You'll be interested to know that Malcolm's 9 symphonies are now considered to be up there with, for example, Shostakovich, the Shostakovich symphonic cycle. And that is saying something. They are important works. So you are taking part in sustaining the life of an important British composer whose work is becoming more important across the world as the years go by. So thank you very much indeed for playing it and being interested in it and doing something very important. Now, this is what musicians do. We sustain the life of a wonderful art, and we sustain the life of wonderful people and composers who wrote music, and you're doing it terrifically well. I'm going to say just a few bits and pieces about the performances, but thank you all for putting the time in. And I do a lot of playing as well, and it does take time to learn all those notes and to think about it and work together, and I think you've all done terrifically well along those lines. So Jamie, the first of his 2 appearances, there you are, for playing the 2 movements of the recorder piece. And thank you very much. lovely sound. And sound, of course, is very important because, in a way, it's the thing that hits you the first. When you hear a performance, the first thing is the sound. And sound is very communicative. And I felt that straight away you gave us a sound that brought us in, that engaged us with your performance. And I thought that you were able to control these very long lines well, which is not easy on the recorder. The slow movement, which you played first, is full of very long melodic lines, drawn out, and you were able to sustain them and keep the mind active all the way through. I think that was very impressive. A good dynamic range as well. You know, there are people out there that says, oh, the recorder doesn't have very much of a dynamic range, but I think you showed us quite to the contrary there. I thought the darkness of that slow movement was brought out very nicely. I wanted you maybe to explore the colours that you created at the ends of phrases. You know, of course, breath is running out a little bit. But have a think about that. You know, how can you explore colour when you're getting right to the end of a phrase? Last movement, again, you say such a contrast, very lively, rhythmical, totally characterful Arnold, which I thought you brought out very nicely. Lots of energy. I thought you gave us lots of energetic accents, very, very important in that. And I thought the end was good with the acceleration and all that kind of stuff. So splendid stuff. There's two other recorder works, well, three other actually that you need to look at. This was quite an early work, the recorder sonatina, which he wrote about the same time he was writing all the other sonatinas, the famous clarinet one and the flute and the oboe. And much later in his life, he met a very famous recorder player called Nicola Petri. Have you heard of Nicola Petri? She's one of the world's most famous recorder players. And he became quite a supporter and a fan of hers. And he wrote her a fancy for a recorder, cello recorder, and a quintet, recorder and string quartet, and a concerto, which in fact we had at the Arnold festival this year. And they're great pieces. The concerto really is a very fine work. It's one of his later works, but it's one of his really good later works. So have a look. But the recorded fancy is similar to the bassoon fancy that we had unaccompanied. Very interesting piece. So well done. Really excellent. Thank you. Alexander, then, as you hear, there you are. Played the three movements of that little, well, not little, that quite serious piano work. Malcolm wrote a lot of piano music when he was quite a young lad, and almost all of it was written as birthday presents or Christmas presents for his mother, as indeed this piece was. But it doesn't sound like, you know, the music of a young composer. It has tremendous depth, particularly those three pieces that you chose. And I thought, and they require tremendous range of sonority to bring them really to life. And I was really drawn in by what you were doing with that. Not to say that I think you can do more yet. And I want you to carry on with those pieces. Don't, you know, we kind of, when we play pieces, particularly when we play them at events like this, we tend to kind of put them away afterwards. But don't do that. It's always good to keep pieces going, re-look at them. I want you to keep playing these because I think they are good works. They're seriously good works, and you brought an awful lot to them. I thought there was some very well-judged rubato in the first movement, and I wanted you to learn, or at least play this from memory eventually. When you do something from memory, it's kind of, you know, it's in your heart, it's in your soul, in your mind. You can bring just a greater degree of freedom. You know, you're not looking at the dots. You're not kind of tied to that thing in front of you. It's all there. And there's, whilst I'm not suggesting you don't play it in time, you can still bring just a bit more freedom to it. I think you feel that freedom when you're playing it from memory. See what you can do, maybe, with that first movement. The romance, the slow movement, the middle one, I don't know whether you remember that, it is an extraordinary little piece. It has such a range from that sort of delicate simplicity of the opening tune, which, you know, sounds like a children's song almost, to this extraordinary darkness in the middle. And I thought you caught that very nicely. This kind of sudden change that piece does. Malcolm had what is now called bipolar, which is, you know, a well-known fact. And a lot of his music has this sort of bipolar aspect to it and shifts mood really quite quickly. And I think it's important for you to know that and also to find a way of expressing that in the way that you play the music. I thought the passion, the questions that the last movement asked are very good. I thought you brought that really well, brought it to life. Maybe you could take a bit more time over the big moments, before you put that big resolution chord down. Just make people wait a fraction longer. But it was good. Bravo. Much enjoyed that performance. Emily played the bassoon fantasy. He wrote all these fantasies as competition pieces. There's one for all the wind instruments and for all the brass instruments. And they're really testing pieces. They were written for professional players as competition pieces, and they test the instruments to extremities. And what you did so well, Emily, was just to make it sound easy. And that, of course, is the art of the great player. However, in inverted commas, difficult a piece is. I don't believe in difficult, actually. I don't think difficult exists. It's kind of an emotional word we use sometimes. Oh, this is very difficult. Please feel sorry for me because I'm doing something terribly difficult, or whatever. If you're doing the right thing at the right time, it's not difficult. And this was the right piece at the right time for you because you can play it. And I really was most impressed by your consummate control, your technical skill, all those kind of very, decorative is not the right word because it's not decoration at all, but all that stuff, you just go around it with such ease, but you're able to put it into a context. It makes sense. And a lot of his fast little work is actually setting up kind of a harmonic context for the music, and I thought you understood that very well, and you were understanding the harmony and how he writes harmonically for the bassoon. So very good. And these solo pieces are a bit like soliloquies, aren't they? Really, it's almost like Malcolm speaking to us, just musing on life and stuff. And so I think there's a certain amount of freedom you need as you're playing these pieces, which also I thought you got very well. I wanted you maybe to explore your dynamic range a bit more, particularly at the louder range. Just what can you do to make a bit more noise sometimes on the louder sections. But I thought it was a terrific performance. Really impressive stuff there. Very promising bassoon playing indeed, so bravo. Then we had the trio. Here you are. Malcolm wrote a lot of a small chamber music like this, which is very effective stuff, because again it explores so much interesting ideas, characters, sounds. He was a great understander. He understood orchestral instruments. I mean, he was an orchestral player, as you may know, played the trumpet. He was a professional trumpeter for a while, played in the London Philharmonic Orchestra and BBC Symphony Orchestra a bit. And sitting in the middle of an orchestra, you kind of get to know how instruments work and what you can do to get the best out of them. And that's what he did. He understood how to get the most interesting sounds out of instruments. And this particular combination afforded a lot of interesting ideas. And I thought you grasped them all, really. I loved your first moment, witty, rhythmic fun, maybe a bit faster eventually. Don't never do this piece again. Maybe a bit faster. But I thought your ensemble was very good. And I like the fact that you wash each other a lot, and that's good ensemble playing. Lots of nice shaping of phrases. I thought the second movement had a real sense of movement about it, in the sense that it was moving forward and one could feel this journey. Good blending of sounds in that as well. Yes, I like the fact that it was Jamie that smiled at the end of the third movement. You're not smile, you kind of look a bit serious sometimes. But I mean, that third movement is extremely eccentric. And so you kind of just reacted to the eccentricity of it. I think you could be even more eccentric, actually, in the way you play that. It's just, what is this about? It doesn't matter, really. Be eccentric. But I like the fact that, at the end of that ridiculously fast bit on the clarinet. Of course you smile. I mean, what else can you do? And you did, which was great. The other movements, I thought they had character, lots of imagination, lots of energy, and very good intonation as a general group. So very engaging. Sam sang some songs. Where is Sam? Right up there. Good, thank you, Sam. The Kensington Garden songs, which, as you say, he wrote when he was still a student. I can't remember who his teacher was then. He had two teachers. One was a man called Patrick Hadley, and the other was Gordon Jacob. I'm not sure which of those two, his composition teachers, which one he was with at the time. I think it may have been Patrick Hadley, because this was quite early on. He didn't like Patrick Hadley very much. But Patrick Hadley was a First World War veteran who had a wooden leg. And he used to like his pupils to kind of screw his leg in for him if you happened to be early in the morning, which Malcolm evidently was one of his first pupils. He didn't like actually having to screw in Paddy's leg for him. I don't think I would either, actually. Would anyone? Anyway, there we are. But he eventually ran away from the RCM, but he got drawn back by George Dyson, who was the principal, and said, "No, do come back. You know, we realised we might not have set you up with the best teacher for you." And I think that's when he changed to Gordon Jacob. But anyway, lovely songs and sung with great sensitivity to the text. And also, I thought you have a very good stage presence, confident but appropriate all the time. And as I say, I thought you brought the text to life in each of those quirky little songs. They are very quirky. You caught each one, just the nub of each one, very nicely. Have you sung all the others as well? Some. I think there's 9, aren't there, altogether? Yeah, it's quite a collection. I mean, it lasts about 7 minutes, the whole lot, because they're so short. But it'd be nice to hear you do the whole set sometime. And lots of other good songs Malcolm wrote as well. He's often thought as an orchestral composer, but a lot of good songs too. Rudy, where are you? Up there. Yes, well done. I love the way you threw yourself into that performance, which is great. Malcolm would have loved that performance because you said, right, here we go. This is a piece of tremendous energy, and that is what I'm going to do, which is what you did. What clarinet do you play?
Sorry?
What clarinet do you use? What's the make?
B flat.
No, I don't speak flat. The actual make.
I use a Selma.
Selma. Is it in one piece?
Yes. No, it's not.
Where does it split? In the middle? I must have a look at it later because it's an interesting. I kind of was trying to work out how that particular instrument fitted together. Anyway, it was great. I love the way you just went for it. A big range of colour, and it's great. Energy is the watchword, particularly in that piece. That actually comes from a film. That piece. It's a bit of film music. You Know What Sailors Are, a film that he wrote the music for in 1953. And it has the most absurd plot you can imagine. Does anyone know what this plot was? Just in a nutshell, it's a kind of war film, but I mean, you can't imagine what kind of war film it is. And the plot is this. There is a warship, and this particular warship, they decide to dismantle the toilet. And then they get all the bits of the toilet and they put it somewhere on deck just before throwing it away. And some Russian, I think it's Russian, or no, some foreign enemy spies on this kind of, bits of the toilet. And they think it's some secret weapon. And all it is, it's bits of a toilet. And the whole film is based on that. It is an utterly absurd idea. Anyway, so there it is. But that actual piece that you played is actually a chunk of the film music. But it's such a good chunk and a self-contained piece. It was eventually taken out of the film and created as a piece. And it works for orchestra, clarinet and orchestra, scherzetto. Originally it was played by Jack Thurston in the film. He was a great clarinetist, and Malcolm knew him very well. Wrote a lot of music for him. The sonatina, the first concerto was written for Thurston. Have you heard of Thurston?
No, but I've heard the song.
Yeah, go and look up Thurston. He was he and Reginald Kell were the two great clarinetists of the 50s and 60s, kind of the middle 20th century. You need to know about them. Once you just think about your top E, a bit flat sometimes, so kind of work out why that is. Like the middle bit, lots of expressive playing there, but tremendous. Bravo! I love the way you threw yourself into that. And then finally we had the wind quintet, who are over there. And over there. Of course, yes, Jamie's over there. No, who's the other player? No, it was clarinet. Yeah. Excuse me. And this is a great piece. Quite an early piece again, 1942 maybe, something like that. And it's one of Malcolm's most popular works. It's really quite well known internationally. But I thought you did it very well. It's a big piece, got a lot of notes in it. Some quite tricky rhythmical moments, are there, in that last movement, where he keeps on changing time, and there's some really quite complicated cross rhythms. But well done. I thought you really kind of sorted that out. The first one is quite a journey, because it keeps on sort of changing style, and a bit of tango in the middle and all the other stuff. And I thought you negotiated that journey very nicely. I thought you were a little bit polite, if you know what I mean. I want you to be a bit less polite in the way you play that. And maybe you could even create a bit of uncomfortable quality of sound sometimes. I'm not suggesting vulgar sounds, but maybe some of the accents could be even more biting. And have a think. You don't have to be polite in playing that piece. You can enjoy yourselves even more. But second movement I thought had a lovely balance and some really nice blending sounds there. Isaac, where are you? Yes, very good end. You get the end all to yourself. I thought you did that very nicely. You can kind of really perhaps even spread it out a little bit more as it's your spotlight on you. But well done. That was nicely done. And in lots of high spirits, kind of shanty-ish high spirits in the last movement, which I thought you caught very well. Maybe a bit faster again, that last movement, when you're a bit more confident of exactly how it fits together. I think it's slightly easier to play, slightly faster. Fun enough, ironically. Maybe just try that. But I thought the balance between the instruments and the various sort of the different bits you brought out well, and thought it through very nicely. Lots of colour. Thought you drew the colour out of the music very nicely. So well done. By the way, and I was mentioning this to Andrew before, there is another wind quintet, which he wrote about 4 months before that piece, which is very good. It's not played nearly so much as the shanties, but it's a very effective piece. Got a very jazzy sort of first movement, very exciting scherzo second movement, and then this rather curious sort of march in the last movement. But I much would suggest you have a look at that as well. Wind Quintet Opus 2, good piece. So there we are, a few minor thoughts on some great playing, and really appreciate what you've done and the time you put into it. And I hope you've enjoyed playing these pieces, and do continue playing them and explore what Malcolm wrote. A lot of it is here, original manuscripts and all sorts of things that you can find and do a bit of research. This final bit of being competitive, I kind of feel as though I said this last year actually, so I'm going to say it again. I actually don't like competitions. I think competitions are not a great thing because music is not a competitive thing. Well, it is in a sense, but it isn't really. Why do we do music? Because we love the music, because we understand that we are part of sustaining a great art. That's why we do it, ultimately. We don't do it because we want to show off. There might be a little bit of that. But generally speaking, the greater picture here is that you're doing something extremely important. And I think that's very, very important to remember that. I often talk about that to pupils or to players who maybe get a bit nervous. I say, well, there's no point you getting nervous because what you're doing is very important. If you see it in that context, suddenly you feel, I know why I'm here. I'm here for the greater good of a great art rather than just for yourself. So competition, can certain things be better than other things? That's such a difficult question. And in a sense, if you're playing the right piece for you, and you play it as well as you can possibly play it, what could be better than that? I often, I do a lot of talking to teachers, and I often give them this scenario, which makes them think. I may have said this last year, actually. Now, imagine two people came in here, both the same age, and the first person played their elementary piece, let's use grade levels, their grade 1 piece, and they played it beautifully. And the second person, same age, came in and they played their grade 8 piece beautifully. Who is better? And the answer is, of course, neither. Because they both played the piece that they chose to play beautifully. The fact that one may be grade 1 and another's grade, it doesn't matter at all. One person is more advanced, can do more stuff, but that's not important really. It's what you do and how well you do what you do. That is important. So how can one judge this kind of thing? Well, I can only just sit here and listen to all these excellent performances you've given and choose one that to me just kind of made a connection, maybe slightly more than others. So in a sense it has to be a slightly subjective thing. And you might say, that we don't want it to be like that. If whoever was adjudicating this, we'd want the result to be the same. Well, you know that's not going to always be the case, because there has to be a certain kind of subjective aspect. There always is. So you're going to have to put up with my view for this evening, and if you don't agree with it, it doesn't matter. All the performances, I mean all the performances this evening, were excellent, and thank you very much for doing them. I really enjoyed them and appreciated it, and I think that you all deserve a lot of credit for doing that. But I have pulled out one performance that I thought was very well considered and touching and musically very deeply able, and had a lot of colour and a lot of thought. And that performance was, in fact, Alexander's piano. So I'd like to give you the prize, but I also want to mention two others in my highly commended. Excellent performances from Emily, top stuff, really top stuff. And Sam, lovely singing. So well done you two as well. Well done everyone, and thank you very much.